This is the Scottish Club Rugby Podcast. The Scottish Club Rugby Podcast. With Stuart Cameron and Dale Clancy.
Hello and welcome to episode 23 of the Scottish Club Rugby podcast, and we're certainly at the business end of the season now, with two leagues already settled in terms of confirming winners who will be promoted next season, and one league where we know who will be relegated. More on all that shortly, but after a break of a week, Dale Clancy is back and we'll be going over the state of play as we head back into club rugby following the two international days. So only one result to bring you from last weekend, and that was a game played last Friday night between Lasswade and Stuart's Melville in National 2, which ended with a 24-15 win for Lasswade to keep their hopes alive. In the Premiership, the four playoff teams have been decided, with Hawick finishing top as number one seed to give them a home tie against the fourth place team, which we now know is Kelso, and March the 2nd will see that first playoff semi-final take place at Mansfield Park, while the other semi-final being played on the same day will see Curry take on Marr, but the two will play this Friday night under the lights at Melrose Park, and whoever wins that will get a home draw. At the moment, 2 points separate the two teams, with Marr in second spot in the table. So let's have a quick look at the Premiership table then. Hawick, I would say home and hosed in first place. They certainly are, but of course, don't forget, they can't be champions yet. There is a playoff to play, a couple of them in fact, if they want to be Scottish champions again. But they're top of the table, 77 points for their 18 games. Marr have 67, Curry 65, Kelso 52, Musselburgh 47, Embrackis 46, Herrick's Blues 45, Selkirk 35, Glasgow Hawks 30 and Jedforest 5.
Yeah, obviously, as you say, there's still a couple of games to play for those sides in the top four to decide who's going to be Scottish champions, but it's intriguing, you know, because we've got a couple of good narratives in there in terms of Hawick obviously playing Kelso on March the 2nd. It's going to be a huge game. Mansfield Park, Hawick versus Kelso. Kelso haven't been in the Premiership for over 2 decades, and all of a sudden they've managed to muscle their way into the top four. And you know, I don't think many people would have seen that coming at the start of the season, but it's given us a huge border tie at the top of Scottish rugby, which is great to see. You know, over the last few years, it's been Selkirk have almost been flirting with that, but just not being able to make it happen. But Kelso have done a good job, and obviously Glasgow Hawks did them a favour a couple of weeks ago. But you know, Friday night's going to be a great indicator as to what the other semi-final's going to look like. So obviously Marr have to travel to Curry and try and make sure that they keep that cushion that they've got in the Premiership table. But I think Curry at home are going to be a really difficult team to try and overturn, and they'll be desperate to get that home advantage going into the semi-final.
Well, let's have a listen to what Kenny Diffenthal has to say, head coach of Marr.
Back into some league rugby for our final game. Bit of a strange one, as it's the last before the semi-finals, to see who gets the home semi-final. So yeah, expecting a battle. It's going to be a tough game, I think, as both teams want a home semi-final. Nice to get a game Friday night lights, something different. Boys are excited for that, and we've prepared as best we can for a Friday night game. Mark and his boys will be well prepped. If I know anything about Mark, he'll have the boys geared up to play us. They play a good brand of rugby, so defensively we need to be on point if we're to stop them. So yes, hopefully we have a good game on Friday evening, and then we'll see them again shortly for the semi-final.
Yes, Friday night at Melrose Park under the lights isn't a phrase I've ever used, I don't think. They always kick off at 2 o'clock on a Saturday, so they've chosen not to use the lights in the winter. And for Marr, a long trek for them, and presumably some time off work for some of the players as well.
Kenny Diffenthal sounds very excited about Friday night lights, and you know, he's obviously a cool and composed leader at Marr, and it's obviously they've got to travel, and that's a different spin on things in terms of the way that they approach their rugby this weekend. And it's always an interesting factor when, you know, the teams, you know, you think about all those players. This is an amateur sport, and you know, some of them will have to have tried to get time off work. Some of them won't be able to get time off work, but you know, I'm sure a lot of the employers and a lot of the areas round about will be very accommodating, because Marr have to travel, go to Melrose, and it's similar for Curry as well. Like, they're not all local players to that area, you know, they're not too far away, but you know, it's just I love Friday night rugby. I think it's such a good addition to have in the Premiership that we can have that in such an important game as well. So I'm sure Melrose Park is going to be packed on Friday night, and obviously there'll be a travelling support as well coming from Marr. I don't doubt that at all, that they'll be making their way across to support them and hopefully get them over the line for that, that home semi-final, which would be important for their club as well. It's an additional game to get some money in behind the bar and get some sponsors on as well. So a lot to play for both these clubs.
And there's history there, with Marr having already beaten them at Millennium Park, which led to them becoming Scottish champions. Yeah,
I was at the game alongside Stuart McFarlane, and it was a really good encounter. It was high scoring, it was entertaining. One of the reasons I do enjoy the playoffs, but let's not get into that just now, Stuart. There's history between these two sides, but any history that Marr have got at the top table of Scottish rugby is very, very recent. So obviously it's a new rivalry between these two sides, and obviously they'll be gunning for a tie against Hawick or potentially Kelso, because you've got to think in the terms of that. Hawick or not, they go into their game as favourites. Right, but it's difficult. I don't think they'd want to play. They'd probably pick any other team in that division apart from Kelso to play in a semi-final. So if Kelso do come through that, Marr or Curry could potentially have a home final. So that's there's still a lot of unknowns in the end of the season. But I'm excited for it.
OK, well, on Saturday, two games that are effectively dead rubbers now. Glasgow Hawks versus Kelso being the first. How are they going to approach that one? Well, we can hear from Hawks head coach Andy Hill and then director of rugby at Kelso, Neil Hinnigan.
Our last out was obviously against Heriots, which was pleasing to get a win for the first time in a while. It was good for the boys. It was something they probably deserved because we've came so close on many occasions, and it's just come down to one or two kind of key moments that we've not come out the right side of. I think we've lost 5 games within the 7 points. If we've even turned 2 or 3 of them into wins, then you're pushing for top 4. But the pleasing thing for the guys was it actually shows what they're capable of. It shows they're capable of beating a side that are looking to be a top 4 team. And that if we'd managed to string a couple of results back to back, which is so difficult in this league just because of the quality of teams every week in, week out, that if we manage to do that, we put ourselves in a position to go away and win some games. This week against Kelso, the last time we played against Kelso was probably our poorest performance of the season. We travelled down there, real lack of energy and quality in the warm-up, and it just led to a real kind of uncertainty and almost like an element of fear when we went down there, and that kind of transferred into the performance, whereby Kelso got an early score, kept a really simple game plan of just running hard, running at 10, kind of really putting us under pressure. And from that, they got an early score and then an intercept that led to another score after us kind of battering on the door, and just boys' head went down from there. So just didn't turn up physically, and that's been a big message this week, that that's the part of the game that we need to focus on and come out the right side of, because we believe if we can get parity there, we've got the players and the backs and the forwards that can obviously pull teams apart, and we've kind of showed that at times. So in terms of personnel this weekend, we'll look at Marcus Goodwin and Kyle Shanahan will come back into the squad, which will mean Gary Strain, who'd come out of retirement and helped us massively and probably was a big part of the win down at Heriots when he turned the scrum, that hopefully Kyle and Marcus will have a big impact there. Stephen Leckie, the club captain, obviously, looks as if he'll return from injury if he gets through training on Thursday. And Lewis, Stuart and Ryan Howe are both available of work, as both of them are firemen. And then in the backs, we've lost Callum Ferry. He looks as if he potentially needs an operation on his knee after kind of lasting a minute or so versus Heriots. And however, we look to welcome back Josh McConkey. Looks like he'll be in the match day 20. Probably won't start just because of loading after a long time out injured. And then we'll maybe give some opportunities to some other guys in the backs as well, just depending on how training goes on the Thursday. So it's exciting times. We're getting closer to kind of full strength towards the end of this season. And, this game against Kelso is again another opportunity to show, against a team that are looking for top 4, that, we can go out and beat them.
Our final league game of the season, away to Glasgow Hawks after 2 reschedulements. Depending on the weather, probably be quite soft in places. I would have thought it's quite a long grass on the pitch up there, and could be a bit of a battle up front. Hawks are fairly physical up front and a big pack, so could be a fair old battle up there. They've come off the back of a good win against Heriots, which obviously helped us as well. It was a bit of a favour there. It saves us having to go up here for a must-win game, but we still want to go up there and put our best foot forward and try and win the match. We are looking for that consistency and momentum for obviously heading into the semi-final against Hawick on the 2nd of March. So we are going through with a fairly strong team, fairly settled. Angus McGregor comes in at loosehead prop for Grant Shields, a very well deserved promotion from the bench for Angus. He's been superb this season. Another lad who's got under 20s prospects and so on, so he really deserves that. Cammy Thompson starts in the second row again. He's just, he got a bit of a knock confidence wise when he was dropped after the Accies game for Curry, but came on against Jed and had a bit of a stormer as well, so he deserves his start as well. So that's all really good and positive for us, that we're spreading it about a little bit to try and get a bit more depth around the squad. So backs are fairly settled, and we're looking forward to the match. Hawks, we beat them at home 29-14. Wasn't Hawks' best day, and that was obviously in the media at the time that Hawks hadn't had their best day down at Poynter, and they've got a few wrongs to right. And now that they've beat Heriots, and I think their last game's against Jed on the 2nd of March, they're really be aiming to get 3 wins from 3 for their remaining fixtures. So plenty to play for Hawks, and obviously there's plenty to play for ourselves. So it's one we're going to go for and try and make a good performance and a confidence booster for the semi-final coming up.
Neil Hinnigan, and before that, Andy Hill. So I mentioned that earlier on about how the teams approach this one. It is difficult, isn't it, when there's really nothing to play for, apart from the jersey, of course.
Yeah, I think me and obviously Bobby Purdy were speaking about it at Riverside a few weekends ago when Kelso went to Riverside and clinched that 4th position. And, my take on it was to keep the momentum going and go full noise. And, if there was maybe some personnel, I think Keith Melbourne was struggling at the time, and, there were some players who perhaps could have maybe done with a rest. You maybe do wrap them up in cotton wool and maybe give them a few minutes and whatnot, but they've been the whole season. They've probably had one of the most consistent teams. When you look through their lineup, most of their players have played 13, 14, 15 games, which shows consistency. It obviously shows a bit of resilience in that squad as well. And the difference between them, when you looked at those two teams, Kelso and Jed had used, I think, 50. They used their 50th player on that day. Kelso had only used 33 the whole season. So it just shows you as well, when you're winning games, there's a little bit more resilience, a little bit more willingness to, play through the pain barrier. So, all of those players will be champing at the bit to play Hawick at Mansfield Park, and whatever lineup, comes out in the field on Saturday, Kelso will have one focus, and that'll be to continue the momentum into that game, because they're chalk and cheese from the last time they played Hawick at Mansfield. It's going to be a completely different battle.
And it is an interesting argument, isn't it? I know Robin and yourself kind of differ a wee bit on it. And it's about, do you wrap them up in cotton wool, or do you let them play and keep this consistency going, which I think is your take on it. Robin, I think, has got shares in cotton wool because he's always mentioning it.
Yeah, I think he has. And he's no betting his mortgages away. He's buying cotton wool. But I think it's a difficult one, and I think it is completely up to opinion.
And the players themselves, I suppose, will know if they want to be in a game and will benefit from playing a game.
Yeah, and it's interesting what you say there as well, because I don't doubt there'll be some players that are looking beyond this game. They'll be looking past Glasgow Hawks and looking at Hawick, and I just think that the mentality is right in that team. Just looking at from the outside in, I would much rather see the likes of Patterson and Frankie Robson link up in the centres for another game in the Premiership to fine-tune things, as opposed to having, changing a partnership. Because, say for example, you take one of them out or reshuffle, then that player's adjusting for one game, where you just want to keep that. For me, you want to keep that continuity going. I've seen too often that teams have approached these games a little bit tentatively and look to try and rest players, and when they come back to the action again for those big games that they're trying to prepare for, they come unstuck. And I just think there's a lot of value in continuing with that momentum. They've got one of the most consistent teams that we've seen in the Premiership this season. Obviously because where they are, they've got one of the lowest losing rates as well. There's a lot that can be said for going out with a strong side to pick up another victory at the weekend. Well,
the other game is Heriots Blues against Selkirk, and we're going to hear from head coach of Selkirk, that's Sesh Henderson.
We're looking forward to our last league game this week up at Heriots, up at Goldenacre. The guys were pretty disappointed with the overall performance against Hawick. Strong side, but in areas we did underperform that day. And so we want to put that right in our last game and finish on a high performance, a positive performance. We want to finish coming away with points, that's for sure. A few changes this week. So we've got Zen's props away with Poland. And we've got a couple of Ross Nixon and Hugh Alderson are on holiday. So Bruce Riddle will come into the front row. And we've got Josh Wells coming to midfield, and Aaron McComb will move to 9 probably for this game. So that allows young Cameron Easton, who's been really well for the seconds and benching for the ones the last few games, to get a start, which is good for him. So we'll go up there with a positive mindset. And let's play the way we want to play. Good track up there, and just put a big shift in for 80 minutes, and let's see what happens. But we're pretty positive we do that, and we want to finish with a big performance.
Sesh Henderson, the head coach of Selkirk, and it's interesting as well because a couple of weeks ago we were looking at this weekend and we're thinking, gosh, we're a great double header here. Heriots Blues against Selkirk in the big build up to the 4th position. Glasgow Hawks playing Kelso. Fantastic. And now they become dead rubbers, and suddenly everything turns to National 2, which we'll be looking at in a moment.
Yeah, I think obviously a couple of weeks ago we were looking at it and Selkirk were coming in a bit of form, playing a little bit better, and you thought it was going to be a really difficult game for Heriots, and I don't think anybody had really seen the Hawks win at Goldenacre. So we are where we are, and I think that obviously listening to Sesh there's a few changes in that Selkirk team, some enforced, some I think are quite progressive and hopefully positive for the years to come. Obviously, I think Ross Nixon at his age, he's probably on a cruise or something, but he's obviously on holiday. But then Cam Easton coming into the side and starting fly half is, he's a player that started at the beginning of the season. He's then had to play in the twos and on the bench. But the way that Selkirk seasons went, I don't know why they've not just chucked him in and given him a little bit more game time, because they were never going to get relegated because Jed are in the division. So I do feel a bit sorry for Cam Easton because he's a really promising player, and I think playing more Premiership rugby would have done him the world of good going into next year. But what it is it gets to the tail end, he'll play one game against a really good team as well. Like Heriots midfield's really strong. Their back row's a strong area for them as well, like a big strong forward pack. So it's going to be one big learning curve for Cam Easton and certainly the young players that are coming into the starting lineup for Selkirk. But ultimately, it's a game that means little for either side.
Let's have a look at National 1 then. Ayr are champions, 74 points. Highland 51, Melrose 51, GHA 51, Watsonians 50, Glasgow Accies 46, Biggar 40, Gala 39, Dundee 29 and GHK 21. Now Ayr home and hosed, although they've lost their last 3 games after winning their first 15, but look how tight it is between 2nd and 5th. 51 points for 3 of the teams, 50 points for the other. Melrose and Watsonians of the 4 don't play this weekend, but down the bottom of the table, Dundee need just 2 points to save themselves from any relegation worries after their 2 wins against Melrose at the Green Yards and Gala at Mayfield. They're at home again against GHA this week.
Yeah, obviously a big weekend at the bottom of the table in National 1. Weeks and weeks ago Ayr were always confirmed as champions, and they've kind of fallen off a wee bit of a cliff in terms of taking their foot off the gas because they lost 3 on the bounce after going undefeated for so long. But at the bottom of the table, Dundee know what job they've got to do, and over the last few weeks they've put in some really impressive performances to bridge that gap between themselves and GHK. Obviously GHK had that game against GHA that there was only, they were able to get a couple of points out of it, but Dundee put in a great performance against Melrose, which was the response to that accumulation of points from GHK. So it's all to do for GHK to survive in National 1, because obviously they're away from home to Glasgow Accies, but Dundee probably have the benefit of the fact that they're at home to GHA, and they've beaten teams round about GHA in the league as well, so they can certainly do it. But it's going to be it could be the weekend that puts the final nail in GHK's coffin. Of
course, Glasgow Accies have only played 15, so 2 less than Highland and Melrose, so a couple of big wins for them, and all of a sudden they're challenging for second place as well in their first season back into National 1 again. So they've done well, and of course they take on GHK, as we've mentioned. A huge game for GHK though, because if Dundee don't get anything from their game, GHK in a derby could get 4 or 5 points and put pressure on Dundee. Both Dundee and GHK have home games on March the 2nd to end their campaign. Dundee hosting Biggar, which is going to be difficult. GHK welcome Watsonians, equally difficult.
Yeah, you'd probably say the more difficult one of the two, I think, is GHK versus Watsonians. They've had a bit of actually they're both difficult games, because both Watsonians and Biggar have had good ends to the season, which is surprising because they're both kind of slightly different sides. But certainly I think that this weekend, I think probably we'll see GHK relegated. As you say, Glasgow Hawks they're mid-table, but they're knocking on the door of second place because how tight it is in that division. So you would imagine that if GHK can't escape with a win this weekend, then yeah, they're down.
Yeah, and of course a Dundee win more or less takes them out of reach of GHK, but certainly a great wag of the tail from Dundee, as we've mentioned over the past few weeks. Now, in the other match in National 1, Highland versus Gala to complete both their seasons. Director of Rugby at Gala is, of course, Ewan Swinton.
We are resuming action this week with the long trip up to Highland after a pretty disappointing outcome to our last game, but we walked off the pitch from that one thinking, my goodness, are there any positives you can take from this at all? But yes, there are, because I think one of the things that we've recognised, and this was partly in a player meeting just in the last couple of days, is that perhaps that top 2 inches that we've talked about in the past is not quite right at times. We've gone up to some long journeys and had some magnificent performances. Our game at GHA was the best we've played all year. And then we go up to Dundee and it goes in another direction. So maybe it's not necessarily just the personnel, but how they're approaching and thinking about a game that's the problem. And it's the players themselves that recognise that. And that's a really good thing. It's so positive for the club going forward. So we are going to head up to Highland with a pretty strong team on Saturday. We're definitely going to be in the mindset that this is not just a season whimpering out, but it's a season we want to end with a bang and then head towards the league season next year in a very positive vein, targeting really positive outcomes at the top end of the table, not the bottom. So we'll do that. We'll get on that bus, we'll go up there, and the determination will be to win, not just to get the game out of the way. So yeah, feeling very positive about the game. It's a great group of guys who are progressing. This season has definitely been one where we knew we weren't going to be promoted, or we were pretty sure. We hoped to be mid-table and to develop and to grow as a team, and I think we've definitely done that. And to hear the players talking in such positive terms about recognising their own shortfalls and what they can do to fix them is massively positive. So yeah, we approach the last game of the season very positively, but very much I think looking at it as the first game of next season in terms of national leagues. And we also are aiming to finish off the Border League season really enjoying our rugby and getting the best positive outcomes from the games to come there that we possibly can.
So a lot of positives in what Ewan has to say, and I think he must win the award, isn't it, for the most positive coach of the year. Yeah,
he's infectiously positive most of the time, Ewan Swinton. So
I think he mentioned the word positive about 10 times in that.
Oh, I think he's there must be a bet in there somewhere. If he can say positive 400 times in the podcast, he gets a fiver or something. But he's a great ambassador for the club, and obviously it's great when things aren't going your way to have somebody that can help pick you up, and obviously try and find the positives when there's not a lot that you can see yourself. So obviously Gala are building towards next season already. We probably said that about maybe 7-8 games ago, that they were going to be looking towards next year, and it's certainly the case. So sometimes in an array of negative results and some poor performances, you have to look at the bigger picture, and obviously Ewan Swinton's doing that in a very positive mind frame.
And so to National 2, and it really is a National 2 weekend that we're focusing on. Peebles at the top with 67, Falkirk 66, Lasswade 58, it's Newton Stewart 55, Gordonians 43, Stewart's Melville 37, Kirkcaldy 30, Stirling County 26, Berwick 20, and Aberdeen Grammar at the bottom with 15. Now this is where it gets really interesting, and all our attention will be put into Division 2 on Rugby Radio on Saturday, with 2 commentary matches for you, including third place Lasswade against second place Falkirk, which kicks off at 2 o'clock. And then Kirkcaldy versus Peebles at 3 p.m. So the full game at Hawthornden before we switch over to Beveridge Park for the second half commentary of that game. Well, let's talk about Lasswade versus Falkirk first then. If Lasswade keep winning with bonus points, they could end up on 73 points. Now, if Falkirk do the same, they'll finish on 76. If Peebles do the same, 77 and champions. So in short, if Peebles win with a bonus point in their last two games, there's nothing the other two can do about it. But that's easier said than done.
Yeah, as I think the end to the season is really challenging for all of those sides. You've got to look at this game as being a bit of a cup final, to be fair, because whatever happens here, Lasswade have to win. You know, and I've said the last few weeks, I do think that the pressure is probably on Falkirk more than Peebles, because I think their run of fixtures was almost slightly more favourable, and I'm only saying that because of experience that I've had with Peebles. Like I'm not suggesting Kirkcaldy away is an easier game than Lasswade away. I'm just saying that of experience in the past, these sort of games are perhaps the ones that see Peebles undone. But Falkirk are hot on their tails, and I think that, you know, this is going to be a big game for loads of different reasons. Because let's say, for example, Falkirk win. If they win and just get 4 points, and Peebles are able to get that bonus point victory, there's almost an element of pressure off of Peebles again. So that's where the pressure is on Falkirk to chase the points, because Peebles just have to. They realistically just have to win. They have to just get over the line and win, and then it makes it a straight shootout for the final game of the season. You know, so I think that's where the pressure is on Falkirk slightly, because they need to go to Hawthornden and they need to pick up 5 points. They need to throw caution to the wind and try and move this big Lasswade pack about. Now, knowing Peter Wright as I do, he will, even if he thinks realistically his team have no possibility of going up, he'll really want to be getting into Falkirk and just upset everything, because we could be talking at the end of Saturday that Peebles are crowned champions and they could be up with one weekend to spare, but we could also be talking about that Falkirk and Peebles are neck and neck going into the final weekend, and it's a matter of who can get the biggest points tally, quite similar to last year and what happened with the likes of Accies, Newton Stewart, and those teams as well. So, you know, it's a huge weekend in National 2, but the big game, first up, Lasswade versus Falkirk. Obviously Robin Purdy will be there. It's a big game for both of those sides, because one team loses, I feel it's curtains for them.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because, of course, Peebles have beaten Falkirk, done the double over them, because they managed to control the play and not let the Falkirk backs, who are, you know, been scoring some fantastic tries all season. If you eliminate them, then you've got a real chance. Yeah,
and I think that's where Lasswade will benefit. They've got a lot of experience. Dale Robertson, who I think was playing number 8 on Friday night against Stuart's Melville, usually in the front row. He's a really experienced player coming from Boroughmuir. You know, he's still it makes a big impact in games. One of the reasons that Peebles were so fortunate in their game against Lasswade was because he departed the field, and
which has since been rescinded.
Yeah, so, you know, obviously that he's a big player for Lasswade, so he's one of the nucleuses of that forward pack, and if he's able to help control and use his experience to try and, you know, starve Falkirk of ball, allow the defensive line for Lasswade to get set and obviously not be torn apart, it's all about that. If Falkirk play with pace and they can get quick ball, you know, it could be a difficult day for Lasswade, but I don't see it being one-way traffic for them. I think they need... Falkirk have to go into this game with a mindset that they need to throw the ball about. They need to get over that whitewash as many times as possible. So that's, the pressure's on them. A low-scoring draw, I think, would probably suit Peebles better, but lots of permutations and very, very exciting indeed. Let's look at Kirkcaldy versus Peebles then. Here's head coach of Peebles, Graham Patterson.
Training's been great on Tuesday to hone back in on our own plan for Saturday against Kirkcaldy away. And they usually offer some physical aspects to their game. I know they have a strong number 8 who's... I've watched a couple of videos of him, and he's a real threat for them, either coming off the base of the scrum or just through taking balls off 9, short balls and runs with real sort of power. So we need to be aware of that and deal with that. But that game against Hawick will stand us in good stead for exactly that type of rugby. But we feel we can target them in certain areas using our sort of varied game and attack. It gives us opportunities across the field from both set piece platforms, launches from set piece, but also multi-phase play and areas that we look to exploit. Maybe a defence that can't cope with that sort of side of things. So we're going to be honing in on those sort of things, and we did that on Tuesday. Once we select the side and nail down everybody for Saturday, that'll be the detail of that will come on Thursday, and then we'll look to go ahead on Saturday and put that into practice. So selection has been pretty keen in a couple of areas in the squad. One person who won't be available for us for a positive reason is Ross Wolfenden. He's been selected for the Scotland Under-18 training camp this weekend, so therefore is at that, so won't be available for us, which is great news for him, and great news for the club as well, to get representation, as well as his colleague Chris Thompson as well, who's been selected for that. So well done to those two guys. Other areas, we'll look at been pretty stable through our squad selection. We've been winning, we've been doing well, so there's just sort of a couple of wee tweaks here and there. Front row will remain the same. Second row pretty similar as well, with Ross Brown and Hamish Bell. Back row's probably the keenest one. Rowan McKeever will come back in there. He offers a great amount of rugby knowledge and intelligence, and also a good line-out threat as well, from the back row as well, both attacking and defensively. Backline's pretty settled, although obviously we don't have Ross, so Jack Harrison will remain at 10 with Caelan McKeever at 9. And a fairly settled backline, outside backs in there with Donald Anderson remaining in the squad to offer his experience at the back, just to marshal that backfield. We've got some strength and depth as well, through having a good number of players back in contention now, so we feel that we've got a real impact from the bench. John and William Napier front row wise, and also Kenny Clyde is the other forward sub, and Buster Davison shown up well in training, and also particularly in that Hawick game when he came on and got his opportunity, is given a slot on the bench for this week as well, and see how we can impact from there. So it's a positive camp. We're just looking to just take this game, give it everything, and come away with those 5 points, but sticking to our game plan, and I'm pretty sure that'll reap the rewards that we look for.
Graham Patterson, head coach of Peebles. Now, if Robin Purdy was here now, I just know what he'd be saying. He'd be saying, surely we're not having a conversation about the fact that Ross Wolfenden has been put into the Scotland Under-18s camp rather than play a big game for Peebles against Kirkcaldy.
Well, I agree. I think that especially young players, and what I've experienced in years gone by is that young players probably flourish a little bit more being surrounded by other experienced players and learning and doing things. And
let's remember, it's a proper promotion match. This is for Peebles, compared with a camp for under-18s. Okay, it's Scotland and everything else. I mean, there will be arguments both sides, but surely a youngster like Ross Wolfenden would gain so much more experience by playing in this one.
Let's look at it at two angles, I think, right? And I do think that the player themselves would gain more experience in this game. It would be a great experience for them, because Kirkcaldy away in a promotion game for your hometown club is a big game, you know, and you can be one of the key components of helping drive your hometown club towards promotion and being champions of National 2. So for me, I think that for that individual, comparing both scenarios, it would be more beneficial for him to be, you know, learning in that environment, but also thinking about the individual. Is the lure or the experience of being in that camp and being in that environment more beneficial for them if they're going to go into something in the future? So you do have to balance it up, and there's different objectives there. It's almost a no-brainer for them as well, because if they do want to, they play rugby because they want to, you know, advance their careers, especially at a young age. They want to be playing representative rugby, national rugby for their country, and then they want to be on the radar. You know, you're going to get that more being in that camp, being in that environment, and pushing for selection than you probably are playing for Peebles against Kirkcaldy, because the coaches can't see your level compared to your peers.
But presumably this camp's going to go on for several days, and this is one day out of it.
Yeah, I know, but you're protecting your product, aren't you? It's like anything with these national camps, is that they've got players that they want to be involved in this squad, and if they relinquish the control of those players and let them go back to the clubs, and they lose everything. They lose, the ability to nurture and look after that player, monitor them, tell them what to do, that professional environment that they're trying to instill in these players. So, yes, I do think that it's not out with the realms of possibility that you can go and play for Peebles, go and, we'll give you the weekend to go and play for your hometown club, but he comes back and he has a knock, or he breaks his leg, or something like that, and that can happen in camp as well. Remember, injuries don't just happen on a rugby field when you're playing games for 80 minutes, but there's less control from SRU, and we've seen it time and time again. Like, Scottish Rugby like to try and nurture their own stuff. The national game is completely different to the club game. So there's a conveyor belt of players that they churn through and discard off the side as they don't make it through. So a lot of clubs have to pick up pieces, but this is an early conveyor belt ride for Ross Wolfenden. He's right at the start, and he'll want to stay on that for as long as possible to be nurtured and looked after. So, I do get it. Peebles will be really disappointed that they've not got Ross Wolfenden for this weekend, but you do have to think of the individual, and I think Graham Patterson alluded to it well, as saying great for him, because that is what Peebles has to be about. At this stage in National 2, they have to be about producing these players, and Chris Thompson's in there as well from Peebles as well. So there's two individuals from that club, from their successful under-16s, that have went through, and Peebles have been able to produce them. So the old heads like Donald Anderson are going to have to come into control. Jack Harrison's not a bad replacement at 10, played English counties, remember. So these players are skillful players that are coming in for a youngster that we're probably putting a little bit too much onus on, and being the the key component in this Peebles side. He's a real big asset to the side, but there's other things on his radar at the moment. So good luck to him in the camp, and the win would be that he's successful in camp, has a successful campaign if he gets selected as well, and Peebles get the win at the weekend.
So pros and cons, both sides.
Definitely, I think you've got to balance it up, and you can be annoyed and aggrieved at the system that Scottish Rugby want the best players and want to look after them and control them, but at the centre of that there's an individual as well who's got his own goals and objectives. So I'm not on either side of that, really. I do get frustrated that they can't play more rugby, because you want these players to be playing rugby for their towns and their clubs, but ultimately there's a youngster there with a great opportunity ahead of him. OK, the other two matches, very, very crucial. Aberdeen Grammar against Stuart's Melville. Aberdeen and Berwick at the bottom end of the table, needing the points. Aberdeen at home there. And on the other one, it's Berwick at home to Gordonians. Let's hear, first of all, from forwards coach at Berwick, Paul Pringle, and then we'll discuss it.
So after a much needed week off, after playing the top two teams in the league away from home, we get ready this weekend to face Gordonians, who have the long travel down from Aberdeen. I think it's probably fair to say it's a much bigger game for us than it perhaps is for them, albeit they'll want to finish as high as possible in the league table. We had a really tough game against them up there. It was nip and tuck. I think we probably let ourselves down a little bit in the scrum, but we did create opportunities, and we run them pretty close. I think the key for me was probably our first phase defence, which we've been working on this week. And we've got Ben Nicholson back in the centre just to help shore up things there. So, yeah, that's our main focus. I mean, we're not in control of events elsewhere, but we know that, if we can get our home wins, we've got 3 games left now, that would assure our place in the league, which really is the key priority. In terms of team selection this week, so we're pretty much full strength, apart from Ecor's still out with a shoulder injury, and unfortunately we lost James Grieve up at Falkirk. However, we do have some new faces back in the team. So we've got young Callum Arthur has stepped up to the first 15. He had time up at Falkirk and by all accounts played really well. So Callum's a big lad, he's a good young player. He's been training with us for a little while now. Now he's turned 18. I think he'll be a great asset to the team, and we've evidenced over the last couple of years with guys like Stu Farnaby that just getting them in the environment, getting them involved with the players, just seeing the way we play and train, etc. It really helps bring these young lads on pretty quickly. So we'll be looking for exactly the same with Callum. He'll definitely get game time on Saturday, and we'll just look to see how that plays out. In other news, Jordan Jackson's back at 15 after an injury he'd received up at Peebles, so that's good. Jordan gives a real attacking threat in the back line, and between himself, Adrian Rose and Jack Dalrymple, that back three is really strong. So we would hope to be causing a few issues there. So all in all, yeah, we're fairly close to our full strength team, and we'll just look forward to getting the game on Saturday, and hopefully just starting to pull away from Aberdeen at the foot of the table.
Berwick back at home after some tough games on the road against Peebles and Falkirk at the top end, but Scrimmerston, well, that's their happy place, isn't it? And Gordonians have nothing really to play for, which could play into Berwick's hands.
Yeah, it's maybe not been their happy place this season, but they're one of their most recent games at home against Aberdeen Grammar was a huge win for them. So, against another team from the north, they'll be hoping to put in another big performance. And you've got to say as well, that long travel for a team like Gordonians, it'll be interesting to see what side do get on the bus and travel to Berwick, because it's one of those games that perhaps it was mentioned there. It's more important for Berwick than it is Gordonians, because it's just about places now and fulfilling games for Gordonians. For Berwick, it's survival. 5 points is a good cushion at this stage. Bearing in mind that, as I always say, points are at a premium at the bottom of the table. So 5 points potentially is a 2-game swing for teams at the foot of the table. So if Berwick can pick up some points, and certainly if they can pick up a win, you've got to say it looks ominous for Aberdeen Grammar for the rest of the season if Berwick can pick up their third win of the season. So obviously they've not been in great form, Berwick, this season. They've not been able to probably progress as much as they'd hoped from last season. They were able to stay in the division, which I think is huge. They've been able to do it again potentially if results go their way, so it's about pushing on after that. So there's been points in the season that they've played really, really well, but again, you've got to think about Gordonians. They've come into this division and developed and progressed as well. There was a time we were having a conversation about them being in the midst for obviously the fight for promotion. So it's not going to be an easy game at Scrimmerston for either side, but from a Berwick point of view, they'll be hoping that the magnitude of the game and how big it is for them, they'll be hoping it's what sees them through.
I was actually up at Rubislaw during the week, snow-covered pitch and all at Rubislaw. Aberdeen Grammar, of course, in the same boat really as Berwick in terms of their playing opposition. The opposition is Stuart's Melville, who have nothing really to play for. Yeah,
Stuart's Melville have nothing to play for, but have been playing really well at the end of the season. I think because they were so underwhelming at the beginning of the season, it's almost like they've done a bit of a bigger and a bit of a Watsonians and went, well,
rejuvenated. Yeah,
let's see the end of our year and put a little bit of pride back in the jersey. So it's going to be an interesting weekend. Both teams at the bottom of the table at home against sides who have nothing to play for. I just think there's a slightly different dynamic. I think Berwick are stronger than Aberdeen Grammar, and I think Stu Mel at this point in the season have been stronger than Gordonians. So probably on the balance of things, it's a harder game for Aberdeen Grammar, but both teams at home, and they need to get points and they need to get wins, so there's a lot riding on it.
Well, the other game in a full National 2 programme is Newton Stewart against Stirling County, and we can get the thoughts of Stirling boss Craig Deakins. And let's not forget, Stirling aren't mathematically out of the woods yet. They're on 26 points, so they've got a little bit of work to do yet if Aberdeen and Berwick pick up some big wins. Unlikely, but it is possible. Here's Craig Deakins.
So a couple of weeks ago we played Peebles up at Stirling County. We knew it was going to be a physical game. They were obviously coming. They needed the bonus point win, so we knew it was going to be an entertaining game. We've been on a good bit of form just recently. We've been quite happy with the way the guys have been training, the way they've been playing, coming stronger towards the end of the season. And the game against Peebles, certainly like all the boys put a good account of themselves in. I was really pleased. It was one of them games that somebody's got to win, somebody's got to lose. We had a couple of chances that we maybe didn't take. If we'd capitalised a bit more on them, then it might be a different story. But it's one of the things that I'm saying to our guys that we need to. These are the sort of games that we should be backing up that sort of performance week in, week out earlier on in the season. And I know we've obviously had a few injuries and stuff, but everyone has that, But for me, it's really positive and really reassuring for the coaching team and for the squad to see actually what we can do on the pitch. So this weekend we've got Newton Stewart away, which I think we obviously got a try bonus point out of that game against Peebles. I was a wee bit disappointed because the game was a lot closer than the scoreline sort of said. 40 points to 29. I would have probably been happy if I'd taken maybe another sort of losing bonus point. If I'd taken 2 points out of that game, I would have been quite happy. However, well done to Peebles. They knew what they needed to come and do, get a bonus point win against us. They got it. You can see that they're a team that's week in, week out, they're playing really well, they're playing good rugby, they know what they need to do to get over the line, and so, I wish them the best of luck for the rest of the season, because obviously it's in their hands as regards to hopefully if they can get promoted or not. So this weekend we've got Newton Stewart away, which I think for most of our squad, none of them have been down there before. We know all about them, we've heard about, it's a tough place to go, like quite a lot of these places are in our league, but these guys, it'll be their last game of the season, so they'll be obviously wanting to finish in a strong one. But likewise for us, we've been building week in, week out, and it's really reassuring, as I've already said, about the performances. Now I'm just wanting our guys to go out there and roll the dice, put another 80 minutes performance on against Newton Stewart, and we'll see what we come away with. But ultimately, we are wanting to pick up some more points just to make sure we're cemented in this league for next season, because it's still a wee bit up in the air as regards to who can maybe go down. Mathematically, Aberdeen are obviously at the bottom there, but till these games actually get played and you can see who's winning and who's losing, I'm not really taking anything for granted at the moment. As regards to selection this weekend, we're pretty much, not many changes from the team at point against Peebles, because all the boys put in a good performance. I think we've got a couple of guys that have maybe picked up some wee sort of bugs and that are going around now, so there'll be a couple of wee changes, but certainly nothing too testing, to be honest.
Craig Deacons, Stirling County playing Newton Stewart. Let's move to National 3 then. The table looks like this. Preston Lodge are champions, 78 points. Orkney have 57. They've still got 3 games to play, but they're Preston Lodge out of sight now after their big win at the Penny Pit. Howe 5, 54. Hillhead Jordan Hill 51. Allen Glens 49. Boroughmuir 46. West of Scotland 29. Dumfries 28. Cartha Queen's Park 15. And Hamilton 10. So Preston Lodge will be playing 2nd Division rugby next season. They're away at lowly Dumfries. Allen Glens take on Boroughmuir in a mid-table dead rubber. Howe Fife are against West of Scotland. But the 2 important games on Saturday in that division, Cartha Queen's Park against Orkney and Hamilton at home to Hillhead Jordan Hill at the bottom of the table.
And both difficult games for those sides as well, because obviously although both sides are at home, and you would still imagine that even though Orkney are not in the promotion hunt anymore, they'll still be looking to pick up a performance and pick up a win, because they've been in great form so far this season. Obviously only lost 2 games. I just think it's a great story. I've mentioned it time and time again on this podcast that the commitment from that group of players and that staffing group as well. So they've obviously got 4 games left to fulfil their season, but it's going to be difficult for both those sides at the bottom of the table. But it's so tight as well, because there's 5 points between them. Hamilton have a game in hand, but it doesn't really matter too much. But on the balance of things, Hamilton have not won a game this season, but are still 5 points behind a side who have won 2 games. So it's showing you that Hamilton are there or thereabouts in some of the games that they've been playing to pick up 10 bonus points of some form. 6 try bonuses, 4 losing bonuses. So it gives them a lifeline, but they've got to pick up a win. They're going to have to win to survive in this division.
The problem with Hamilton, I think, has been more recent times, because they've got their bonuses, those 10-point bonuses, very much at the early part of the season. Since then, they haven't really been as competitive as they were early on. It's
amazing what a win might do as well, and obviously they've got an extra game to try and pick that up, but they're in the position they are because they're struggling to win. They're struggling to pick up those victories and see those games through. So points are at a premium. So at the bottom of the table, it's going to be vital this weekend that against teams that are higher than them in the division, that they can pick up some sort of points. And especially for Hamilton, I think that a win is, for every single game now that they're going to be playing, that is the objective, is to win, not just to survive. That, and sometimes in these games when there's a gulf, and there's an obvious gulf in class, it's sometimes just to stay in the fight, but it's to go out, show a bit of dominance and try and pick up a victory.
Well, finally on to National 4. Garnock unbeaten at the top of the table, the only unbeaten team out of the 50 sides in the 5 divisions. 69 points for them, played 14, won 14, 13 try bonuses and a 534 points difference. That's what you call pretty emphatic at the top of the table, but not confirmed as champions as yet. White Craigs second place, 56, Strathmore 51, Stewartry 46, North Berwick 42, Dunfermline 39, Greenock Wanderers 34, Perthshire 23, Murrayfield Wanderers 22 and Ross High on 11. Now White Craigs in second and Strathmore in third don't have a game on Saturday. Garnock unbeaten in 14 games. They host Dunfermline, who are 6th. Greenock are at home to Ross High. It'll be their first game for a while due to the tragic loss of their captain. And of course they have a mountain to climb to survive the drop into regional rugby again. North Berwick play Perthshire and Stuart are at home to Murrayfield Wanderers. Remember, 3 go down from that division to make way for the winners from the 3 regions who will come up. And as it stands, Ross High, Murrayfield and Perthshire are the likely candidates for relegation.
Yeah, obviously there's a discrepancy in the amount of games that they've played with Ross High's break, obviously due to the unfortunate circumstances and some cancellations in there as well. So there's a little bit of a gulf mathematically between the sides, but there's still games to play, and Ross High have got a fixture against a side who are not too far away from them in the division, away from home this weekend. But if they can pick up some points and get a bit of confidence, and if they can pick up a win in the teams round about them in terms of Wands and Perthshire, they're away from home as well. If they're not able to pick up a victory, then it makes the job that little less ominous when you're looking at the league table. So big weekend at the bottom of National 4, but certainly those 3 sides, Ross High have got a mountain to climb to try and get out that bottom 3, because Greenock Wanderers, you would imagine if they can pick up a victory, it does put that gulf between them and the 3 sides at the bottom.
Well, that's it for this week. We'll be back on Saturday at 1:30 for a live programme from Beveridge Park in Kirkcaldy for second half commentary with Dale Clancy and Sam Matthews of Kirkcaldy versus Peebles in National 2, and also full commentary before that of the other huge game in Division 2 between Lasswade and Falkirk, and Robin Purdy and Ian Hurd will be there for full commentary on that one. So another massive day at the business end of the season, and to tune in, simply go to rugbyradio.co.uk and click the Listen Live button. We'll have another podcast for you next Thursday, the only podcast devoted exclusively to club rugby in Scotland. Do help spread the word, and we'll see you next week.